right, thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about absolute value. All right, so first of all, let's just refresh your course on what absolute value is. Simply a number's distance from zero, okay? And this year you probably are starting to learn a little bit about negative numbers and positive numbers, okay? So we know that negative and positive numbers have a particular distance from zero, which is what makes them opposites. So 6 and -6. Now the interesting thing about that is, though they're on opposite sides of zero, they both have a distance of 6 from zero, and that's what absolute value is all about. Down here you'll notice at the bottom where I talk about the absolute value bars. The absolute value bars are two bars that will basically envelop a number, or will just basically close in a number, and what that tells you is to find the absolute value of that number. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of that, and I'll show you that this really isn't too bad. So find the absolute value of the following. The absolute value of 25. Again, and what they're asking you here in general terms is simply how far is 25 from zero. So again, if you were just simply counting 25 on your fingers, how many places would it take you to get there? Well, hopefully you would say 25. So your answer to that would be 25. Down at the bottom, you'll notice we try to throw in a little bit of a trick here by including a negative number. The absolute value of -15. Now you might be thinking that that would be negative. However, absolute values are always positive solutions. One thing we need to keep in mind here is that there really is no such thing as a negative distance. And we keep that in mind with absolute value because all solutions should be, when you're asked about absolute value, they should be positive. So the absolute value of -15 is actually 15, because again, what they're saying is how many places from zero is 15? -15, excuse me. And it's not -15 places, it's actually 15 places. So if you just simply started counting, and I'll show you, let's say 0 is out here and 15 is out here, -15. If we just simply started counting how many places it took us to get from 0 to -15, you would start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and you would finally get there. But you're not counting negatively, you're counting positively, which is why your answer in this case is a positive 15. So let's look at a couple more here. Find the absolute value of the following. So again, we have a -32. So the absolute value of -32, or its distance from zero, would simply be 32 places. That's all, on a number line. The absolute value of 68, again, is going to simply be 68. Now don't fall into the assumption that these mean opposites, and that's sometimes what students will do. They'll see these absolute value bars and they'll say, well, the opposite of -32 is 32 is the answer. That's not correct. It's always the distance from zero, which means your answer should always be positive. There are other instances where they may be negative, but you won't run into that till later on. All right, so let's look at a couple more. These are a bit different. These next couple of examples, you'll see that we include unknowns here. So what they're saying in these problems is what numbers could represent X. And I say numbers because technically, remember, we can have negative numbers and positive numbers inside these absolute value bars. So what numbers have a distance of 8 from 0? Well, again, let's look at a number line, a real brief sketch of the number line here. We have 0 in the middle, and we know that 8, which would be out here, has a distance of 8 from 0. But is there not another number? Yeah, actually it's opposite of -8. Okay? So that is why you actually get two answers here. There are actually two numbers that you can substitute in for X there to get the correct answer. And you do need to actually write both of them. So your answer in this case would be 8 and -8, because both of those numbers have a distance of 8 from 0. So knowing that, down at the bottom here, you can see that we also have the absolute value of X equals 15. So hopefully you're starting to put 2 and 2 together here, that even if I don't draw out the number line, you should remember that you have a positive 15 out here and a -15 out here, which both have the same distance from 0, which would be 15 places. So your final answer here would again be -15 and 15. All right. So let's just look at a couple problems that you might run into, word problems. All right. To build a water well, John must dig to a depth of negative 30 feet. How far down is the bottom of the well from the surface? Well, the interesting part about this problem is that's probably not how we would actually say it. We probably wouldn't say that he dug to a negative 30 feet depth, which is why I mentioned earlier that we don't really deal in negative distances. We would simply say that he dug 30 feet down, okay, or below. And so that's why this problem here in this little phrase, negative 30 feet, is a little odd. But what they're looking for you to do in this case is to find that absolute value distance. So the absolute value of negative 30, they want to know what the solution of that would be. How far down is the bottom of the well from the surface? Well, it's actually the distance from 0 of negative 30, which would be 30 feet. So the solution is technically going to be how you would normally say it anyway. But since negative 30 has a distance of 0 of 30, that's going to be your solution. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for you to recognize that negative 30 as being a bit odd. And the next one says Coach Pryor received a fixed $56 credit to spend on extra soccer supplies. If he spends $45 on supplies, will the credit cover his purchase? So ultimately what they're really going to want for you to understand here is what a credit is. Okay, a credit would be something that a company gives you maybe because they made a mistake. So they made a mistake and they're offering you free spending basically. So they're giving Coach Pryor in this case $56 of free credit towards their store to spend some money. It's important for you to know that because otherwise this problem might be a little confusing for you. So in this case, Coach Pryor received a $56 credit. Will $45 be covered if he spends that much? This is basically simple subtraction because if he has a $56 credit, he can subtract the $45 and we can see if it actually will be covered. So 56 minus 45, we can see that we get 11. Now, where absolute value comes in is because a lot of times they'll denote credits as maybe being a negative 56. But in this case, you don't have to think of it like that. You can simply say he has $56 to spend. You're going to subtract what he spent, $45, and you can see that he actually is left with $11 that he could still spend. So as far as an explanation is concerned, you would simply say that he definitely is okay on his spending. He has $11 left over. All right, and that's a quick little tutorial on absolute value. Thank you for joining me.